is Tiffany Carl. I'm a student at Delta College. I'm here today to introduce to you an extraordinary individual, a survivor of the Holocaust, and a social activist. She is here today to speak to us about the persecution of Jews, her personal encounters, and her enduring survival amongst 6 million Jews sentenced to death. Elane Norych Geller was born in a small town in Poland. She was tortured for 5 years in the Nazi death camps, as were her father, mother, sister, 2 brothers, grandparents, and many aunts and uncles. In honor of Miss Geller, March 8th of every year is proclaimed as Elane Norych Geller Day at Delta College. Before Miss Geller comes out, I'd like to leave you with a quote by Maya Angelou. "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again." Will everyone please join me in welcoming Miss Elane Norych Geller.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be back at Delta. In fact, I've been here so often, guys, that somebody in the back there saw me and said, "Do you have a room here by now?" It's the truth. I am honored to be here. As you heard in this lovely introduction, I was imprisoned for almost 5 years. I am one of the youngest survivors of the Holocaust. Be aware that the average age of a Holocaust survivor today is 83. 83. And sociologists tell us that 100 of us die daily. So it is clear that the next 10 or 15 years will be the end of an audience such as you being able to speak with someone like me about the things that occurred. And speak we will, I hope. There will be time for questions at the end. Why would somebody in their right mind travel throughout this country and repeat again and again information that is so painful and personal, and for someone like me becomes more painful as the years go by, as the survivor community shrinks? I am now very much aware of that. It is very difficult for me to hear a survivor say to me, "We talk about the Holocaust and you teach the lessons and you must do this always." I need to go to a higher place. I believe that racism, anti-Semitism, bigotry, hatred of any kind, is as catching, as contagious as AIDS and any other communicable disease. I am here not to teach you to hate anybody. I'm here about prevention, about recognizing the disease early on, and perhaps, at the very, very least, say something, if nothing else. Be aware, please, that the world was silent when this was going on. People knew, they didn't know all the details, but it wasn't PC to help Jews. The racists, the bigots, the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, the skinheads, there'll always be some form of that kind around. The challenge that we have is, will they become a small minority who meet secretly in dark rooms and drawn curtains, or will they be mainstream society? That is our challenge. Perfection is something we're going to work on the rest of our lives. Now, born in a small town in Poland, a place called Wodzisław. The town had in it about 4,500 people. Close to 4,000 of them were Jews, and 4,500 people, almost half, 2,000 people were Jews. It was not the Middle Ages. We knew this madman was loose. We know that war is bad for everyone. We knew it would be worse for us. Why? Because Hitler did not invent anti-Semitism. He simply perfected it to a science. We were persecuted before Hitler. so we knew it would be worse for us. And so, 6 million of us were murdered, but the plan was to murder 11 million, to make Europe Judenrein, clean of Jews, zero Jews, and in that spirit, no Nazi soldier ever had to ask permission to kill a Jew. The aim was zero. If you killed a Jew, you were helping out the cause. 5.5 million, these numbers, by the way, do not include soldiers. 5.5 million non-Jews, gypsies, gays, political dissidents, Jehovah's Witnesses, anyone that did not go along with the plan to build a master race. The ideal was tall, blonde, and blue-eyed. None of us, most assuredly most of us, would be a candidate for life in this room. Tall, blonde, and blue-eyed, a master race. We all know what Hitler looked like. Hardly the prototype, but perhaps when you're filled with so much hate and anger and ambition and evil, maybe when you look in the mirror you see what you want to see, not what's really there. And so my family consisted of mother and father, 2 older brothers, an older sister. I was the youngest. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everything I hope and pray is in your life, has been, continues to be. Various Jews throughout Europe tried to protect those most vulnerable in their family. The very old, the very young, the disabled. In my family, that was me. I was the youngest. My father hired a young seminarian to tutor me at age 4 in the kinds of things that a child would need to know in order to pass as a Christian child in that community. If we'd lived in a larger city like Warsaw or Krakow, we could blend into the wall. But a small town in Poland. Poland is an extremely devout and religious country. Has been throughout its history. A child of 4, if she was going to pass as a Christian, needed to be taught and prepared, and indeed I was. This young seminarian my father hired taught me children's Bible stories and little hymns that a child might learn in the New Testament. I was given false papers, a false birth certificate, a false baptismal certificate, an arrangement made with a Christian family in our community that if the Nazis came into our town, I would be taken to this Christian home, left there till the war ended. At the end of the war, whoever was left would come and claim me. Now, many of these arrangements were carried out exactly as planned, and many were not. As we survivors are getting older and older, some of us have already gone to the next world, not being 1,000% sure that the child we left behind wasn't either turned over to the SS when we were moved out of the town. Sometimes the family became very fond of the child, baptized it, converted it, hid it from the Jewish family member when they came to claim it after the war. Both scenarios are equally true. And so the day came. The Nazis marched into our town. They started out by rounding up all the Jews on their knees in the town square. That was not my first memory. Mine was my father putting on this 4-year-old an enormous amount of clothing, so many dresses I could barely put my hands down. He also took off my earrings. It was not unusual at all for Nazi punks to grab a Jewish woman running and pull on her earlobe without ever breaking her stride. A child wasn't even a challenge. All they had to do was reach out. And so, once my father put all these clothes on me, he and I started to walk towards the Christian home as the rest of the community was being gathered. And on the way, my father noticed here and there a door would open up with what appeared to be the head of a household with a small child at his side, would walk the child up to the SS and say something like, "I don't know who this is, it's not my child. It must be a Jewish child that wandered in here by mistake." And that's all it took. The child, the accompanying Jewish adult, shot, killed right in front of everybody. As an example, they were not to be messed with or disobeyed. The family of the child located in the center of town and killed, same way, same reason. And the Christian family punished as well. But not the same way, I promise you, not the same way. Once my father saw this betrayal, he instantly changed his mind, decided to keep me with him, to gamble. He and I turned around, walked towards the center of town to locate and join the rest of the family. It took about 20 to 30 minutes, and by the time we got there, 2 of my uncles were already dead. My father's youngest brother had a loaf of bread under his arm, and in the bread, he stuffed some jewelry, earrings, a ring, some small items of value. We were not allowed to bring anything into these camps. We were not permitted to do so. We needed something to be used later on for a bargaining chip, for a favor, for a crust of bread. And so we became very, very creative. People stuffed jewelry into bread, put items of value in the hems of their clothes. My uncle's bread fell. It hit the ground. The SS saw the jewelry. They shot him, his brother-in-law, right away. One of the bunches around us, people pulled out of the community, small clusters of people, to help in our own death and demise and destruction. Strong-looking men dug ditches for mass graves. People shaved hair. People took gold out of inlay. And for that, maybe, they got an extra crust of bread. The caloric intake of a Holocaust prisoner, 400 calories a day, doesn't matter what these calories consist of. You can't live very long on 400 calories a day. It was, in fact, a diet designed for death, for attrition. 200 calories at night and in the morning, consisting of a triangular piece of Schwarzbrot, black bread, and some dirty water that was to pass the soup. I officially never got any food. You got food if you worked, if you were counted. I didn't work, I wasn't counted. My aunt shared her food with me, and I had other ways, as you'll hear in a moment. One of the groups, however, very close to where we were being shot at. People were screaming, bleeding, dying, and falling down. In that group, my grandparents and my mother. My grandparents were very elderly. The old would need help to get on a transport truck, to be driven elsewhere for more efficient killing. Why bother? They took these people, they shot them right into ditches, dug by Jews who looked strong enough to do it. And we watched. My mother, I was told, was recovering from extremely minor surgery. Here again, they weren't going to put her on a gurney, take her to a hospital, get her well, and then kill her. Why? As soon as that massacre was over, as soon as it was over, we were quickly moved out of the center of town to a small holding camp not too far away. The camp surrounded by electrified barbed wire. We were given armbands with yellow stars of David on them, and that moment was the very moment of the end of our freedom. Different family members sent to different work camps, death camps. You had no idea where they were going. You certainly didn't know if you'd ever see them again. My 16-year-old sister, sent to a place called Auschwitz, where at 16, she died in the ovens of Auschwitz, simply and only because she was a Jew. Dummies and uneducated people don't make blueprints for ovens and gas chambers and crematoria. It takes an educated architect to do that. You must always study history in the ambiance, in the atmosphere in which it occurred. Auschwitz. A Holocaust survivor needs to explain Auschwitz. Hitler tried twice to get into office. Lost the first time, won the second time. It was a time in Germany when the economy was almost zero. There were no jobs. Kids couldn't find a way to go to college. People couldn't find work, and it was perfect. Perfect. Still works today for scapegoating. The Jews, the Jews, the Jews, get rid of the Jews, and things will be better. Well, they did get better. Places like Auschwitz pop up. Out of nowhere, the people in the surrounding area could see the smoke of Auschwitz, unlike September 11th. Belching out smoke that smelled of human flesh burning. And suddenly they had jobs. They were making pillows out of human hair, jewelry out of gold inlay, fertilizer out of our bones, and nobody asked, what's going on over there? Where are these jobs coming from? The same thing in the cities. German businessmen bid on huge government contracts for Cyclone B gas, barbed wire, striped cloth. They didn't ask either, and things were getting better. Next, my aunt, my father's sister. It is largely due to her care and the coincidence that we remained together that I survived. She never had any children of her own. One of the uncles killed in the beginning, her husband. She always claimed to be my mother, very dangerous thing to do. Often the Nazis would say, mothers and children, you're going to a Kinderheim, a children's home. Why did they say it that way? That too was well thought out. They said it that way because they knew if they'd go up to a young mother and grab her toddler, her infant, there would be screaming and crying and hair pulling. They said, these are not stupid women. We'll tell them they're going to a children's home. They will leave teenagers behind, as old as some of you in this audience, hoping that you looked older, that you might pass as an adult, that you might live one more day. Every day that you lived, there was a hope that there would be yet another day. But I was 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. We couldn't survive on our own. These mothers took their babies, their children, and went to what they thought was a children's home, and most of the time they went to the ovens and gas chambers of the Holocaust. My aunt always claimed to be my mother. She and I sent to a small coal mining town, not too far away. Poland is a very small country. My father desperately tried to track us. Any prisoners, new prisoners that came in, did you see my daughter? He would describe us, my sister. Of course, if they knew the family, that helped. And he located my Aunt and I in Stekachin. And he somehow arranged for her to be snuck out in the middle of the night, and I was thrown over electrified barbed wire onto a large transport truck filled to the top with coal. Both my aunt and I, buried under that coal, told not to cough, not to sneeze, not to make any noise. All vehicles during wartime are inspected with enormous searchlights. And miraculously, we were reunited with my father and brother very, very briefly. Then all 5 of us sent to a slave labor camp called Skarżysko. The camp had many sections in it. Once we got to that camp, I had no idea where my father and brothers were. They could have been in the same camp in another section, another camp in another country, or they also could have been dead. I had no idea. My aunt put to work in a munitions factory, and for some bizarre reason, there were 12 or 13 other very, very small children there. We don't know exactly why we were allowed to be. We're guessing. The officers might have missed their own children. It might have made them feel more human. In any case, we were not a problem. If they wanted to get rid of all of us, some of us, 2 of us, they could have done so. They didn't need permission. Nevertheless, our caregivers always gave us instructions. My aunt left for work for almost 5 years. When I'm not with you, stay in the barracks. Hide if you hear footsteps. Don't be in anybody's face. I obeyed her. I wouldn't be here this afternoon with all of you. When I didn't, I got into trouble, and I'll explain. During this almost 5-year period, I had typhoid, typhus, tuberculosis, punctured eardrums, never, ever, ever treated in a so-called infirmary. What do you think they would do with a Jewish child if you brought it to an infirmary? Why would they get me well? They were going to kill me anyway. I had lice and rats in my hair. I stole, I ate toothpaste, I drank urine, I did whatever was necessary to fill my belly and stay alive. Many times when a few of us children would wander out, we were told to hold hands and look up as they hung rows and rows of people and laughed while we children cried. One time when I walked out, a couple of SS soldiers looked at me, looked at each other for fun, said, "Look at this hair. It's too pretty for a Jewish child," and shaved me bald. My aunt came back from work and started to cry because she could barely recognize me. For crying, they beat her in front of me with a large rubber hose over and over again. Lots of times when I would wander out, again for fun, they would address enormous packs of German shepherds, talk to the dogs as though they were human and I was the dog. "Mensch, beiß dem Hund." Persons bite this dog. And I was attacked and chewed on and bitten and mauled. And I begged, I pleaded, I cried, and eventually they called the dogs off. The physical scars are well healed. The emotional scars are not. I swear to you, I go nowhere that I do not make absolutely certain that the pet you own and love and I hope treat well, is behind a locked door. When I'm confronted with a loose animal, I have a flashback. I become once again that child of the Holocaust, begging and pleading and crying for mercy. As you can imagine, a sense of embarrassment follows, a fear. Sometimes it takes me very long before I wander out of my home comfortably. Other times it takes just a few minutes. Next, my aunt and I were packed into cattle cars, railroad cars, boxcars. The conditions are beyond description. All of your bodily functions, all of them, performed right where you were standing. What I remember most of all and will not ever forget, my aunt's screams as she pleaded and begged and feared, real or not, and asked the other inmates not to eat me alive. And that train was taking us to a place called Bergen-Belsen, where a young woman and her sister, Anne Frank, and her sister Margot died within 3 or 4 weeks of arrival and liberation. The trains always stopped a good distance outside the barracks. It was wintertime. We marched on this ground that was solid ice. They were just beginning to lose the war. They were killing beyond randomly. If you stopped to help somebody or to help yourself, if they caught you, in their eye view, you were gone. They wanted no witnesses. They wanted no Elane, Norych, Geller at Delta, or any place else for that matter, to speak to what really happened. And so, arriving in these barracks, we were with frozen feet. My feet were so badly frozen, my aunt would stick her fist in my mouth. When they began to thaw out, it's very painful. Women from all over Europe were arriving. Most of them had already lost their family, and most assuredly their children. This child didn't care. I would go up to these different nationals. I would ask them to teach me a children's song in their own language, like Frère Jacques, or London Bridge, or something like that. Then I'd go off into a corner and practice it. When I thought I knew the song well, I'd go back to the woman who taught me the song. With my hand open, I would sing to her. She was crying. She needed the food more than I did. I didn't care. I took it, and I never looked back. My aunt and I were freed and liberated by the British in Bergen-Belsen. One of my brothers survived in a place called Buchenwald. The other of my brothers and father survived in another country, in Czechoslovakia, in a place called Theresienstadt. At the moment of liberation, of course, none of us knew that the other had survived. That came about 2 months later. We were taken into refugee camps. We needed medical attention. Most of all, what we needed, most of all, is to find a way to get off German soil. And of course, the churches, the synagogues, the Red Cross, the newspapers, they all came into these camps, took down ads. We all gave them ads. We didn't even know names, we gave them ads. An ad placed by one of my brothers read, "I am Jacob Norych, son of Israel Mordechai Norych, looking for family anywhere. Believe it or not, my father actually had a brother in Brooklyn, New York. His last name no longer Norych. It was now Warshawski. Immigrants that came to Ellis Island in those days, it was very, very messy bureaucratically, took the same last name, made one step a tad easier. My uncle reads this ad in a Yiddish newspaper on a Sunday morning, paper called The Forward, still in print, recognizes the town, the family name, and raises heaven and earth to quickly get us off German soil, so that the 5 of us arrived in the United States on the very first boatload of refugees to come out of the Holocaust. That was in May of '46. I entered kindergarten the following September, 4.5 years behind grade level. I'd never been to school, I didn't speak a word of English, and started our lives here. Only the Jews were targeted for genocide, only the Jews. They said the rest they were going to fix. That's the one question I can't even tell you. I can't even attempt an answer. I don't know what they meant by it. Those souls are gone. I have taken my anger, my passion, and become an activist. I think it's the only way to go. The more freedom we have, the more responsibility we have, the more ways to be upset and angry. Become an activist. Do not give your enemy, as I wouldn't give mine, the great pleasure of being anything but decent. For me to become a criminal would be to give Hitler a posthumous victory. Don't even go there. I'm not ever going to do that. The job is ours. It's ours. We do not have to be angels, but we cannot be silent. And I invite you to think critically. When somebody says to you, all Jews are this, all blacks are this, all Asians or Hispanics are this, and you don't open your mouth and say, I don't know all these people. I will judge people by how I experience them one-on-one. Words are powerful, guys. Remember the words of Jesus and Moses and Dr. King and Mother Teresa and Shakespeare are going to live long, long after you and I are gone. I can make you sing with words. I can make you cry with words. Go to war with words. End in therapy with words. Words are powerful. Be careful how you use this precious gift. Thank you.